We talk about cornerback prospects that the Chicago Bears should target next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron, and welcome in to another draft profile episode. These are my favorite ones to do. I love the draft season, so I love going through these and just breaking down these 5 early and 5 late round prospects that the Bears might be looking at, and just to keep in mind as we go towards the draft season, because it's only 8 days away, ladies and gents. I'm so excited for this. I usually just have a big party during all this, so it's always an exciting time. But today, cornerbacks. Cornerbacks are going to be the big thing for us to be watching out for. And this is actually one of my kind of most intriguing position groups because we all know that what we have in Jaylon Johnson, a young stud, lockdown corner. We absolutely love him. But then at the slot cornerback position, so Tavon Young is slotted in, no pun intended, as the starting slot corner over Duke Shelley. Now, I finally got around to watching some Tavon Young tape because I just haven't had a lot of time, to be honest with you guys. So I finally was able to watch it, and he is a slot corner. I was just always used to seeing him as an outside corner like he was at the very early stages. But for this, he's going to be more of a slot corner for us, and I'm more than fine with that. He has some good upside. He's just a little injured. He's usually injured a lot of times, but it's at least a good dynamic. You have Young, if he's healthy, that's good. And then you have Shelley as that backup. So I feel like we're kind of set there too. So then it's really the right side cornerback position. And that's why it's so intriguing to me because we saw Kendall Vildor last year. There's no analysis that needs to be thrown there. We saw him last year. I will like we all have given him his well-deserved hate for how he played, but I will say, potentially he does have some upside. He was coming from Georgia Southern. Am I expecting big things? Not at all. But really, it'll be interesting to see if he actually develops at all. But the biggest storyline is going to be Thomas Graham Jr. because Thomas Graham Jr., we saw how amazing he was when he was out there, when he was playing. And then we kind of hear that he was just kind of up and down inside of some of the mini camps and training camps and practices. So that's why they didn't feel comfortable with him out there starting. So I feel bad for Eberflus because he's probably looking here and going, okay, I saw those games. He looked like a beast. You watch the film, you're like, this guy's a beast. This guy does everything. But is it just because it was his first start? Was he trying extra hard? Something. I don't know. Are you trying to make excuses, or do you really think that you have something with this player after like a 2 game, 3 game type of sample size? Because Matt Nagy didn't give us, or actually more so, Sean Desai didn't give us a lot of tape on Thomas Graham. That's why I think it's so intriguing. So hopefully we're seeing something out of some of these offseason programs, and we're feeling a little bit more comfortable with Thomas Graham, whether he is going to be a backup or he's going to be a starter. So that's why I'm curious. Are we going to go high and draft somebody to be that starter, or are we going to look at somebody a little bit later on as a backup? So kind of replace. We have Lamar Jackson, not the cornerback as our backup cornerback right now, and that could be a spot where we add just extra depth later on. But that's enough talk. Let's get into the draft. So for the draft, there's really kind of 4 cornerbacks that definitely won't be around. So we're talking about Sauce Gardner, Andrew Booth, Trent McDuffie, and Derek Stingley. We don't expect them to be available to the Chicago Bears. There's no rumors that they're really kind of falling. They're not going to be there. But there is one guy that is kind of borderline. I do see him usually going inside of the first round. So I do think that he's somebody to at least be on the lookout for and be aware. He's my first cornerback on this list, and it's Kahir Elam out of Florida. So Elam, he is typically going around 29th to 32nd. So that's why like he could potentially fall. but chances are he's probably not. Every mock draft I've seen, he's a first rounder, but he is dropping more and more and more according to a lot of the PFF mock drafts. So that's why he could potentially drop to the Chicago Bears. He's 6'2", 191. We've already talked about Eberflus's love of length inside of in cornerbacks, so that's why I could see him being a good fit inside of this scheme, and Eberflus really liking just the overall length because you're not really getting that out of some of these earlier cornerbacks. Actually, some of them, yes, but his speed and some of his coverage combos, you're not really getting with other ones. But just a couple little pros. What do we like about him? Well, besides his length, he started out as a freshman, obviously in the SEC. So going against very tough competition, very tough, very fast competition. And as a sophomore, he ended up allowing a 42.6% completion one, he was in coverage. So obviously, great numbers. You love to see that from him. Very physical, excels in kind of that press zone. That's why Eberflus is probably licking his chops going, I hope this guy falls to us because if he does, he could be a really, really good scheme fit for us. And he's shown good production against very, very good competition. So you love to see it. And that's why he's still kind of a first rounder. But why is he dropping? Why are we seeing him towards the tail end? Well, personally, when I saw him in during the combine, I couldn't believe that this is a first round caliber type of player. Not saying he's absolutely terrible, but nothing really shown. And yet again, it's the underwear Olympics, it's the combine. You can't put too much stock into it, but still, it was just seeing him side by side by side with everybody else. I wasn't necessarily impressed with his overall athletic ability. He's also been very, very injury prone, so that's why a big reason why he is falling. Can he actually stay healthy? So far, the answer has been no. So that's why a lot of teams are kind of turned off by, yes, you're big and everything like that, and you have good production, but if you're not able to stay healthy, then I don't want you on the team. So I'm not in love with his coverage skills when I was watching the tape. Just wasn't a big fan. Very, very grabby though too. So he relies way too much on his hands, in my opinion. And really, that's why when he's in press coverage, you gotta love him. But when he's asked to play more of that off coverage, so think Kyle Fuller, that's where he really starts to struggle because he uses his hands a lot. And that's why more teams might be a little bit turned off on this. This might not be a good scheme fit for some people, but it still should be a good scheme fit for us at least, where he might be asked to play a little bit more press coverage than in other systems. So that's really Kahir Elam out of Florida, where basically he could potentially drop. But honestly, most of the time he's probably not going to be there. But just in case, if he's available on day two, we at least kind of know who they are. It's more of a just an awareness because he's end of the first round. But let's go to the next one. This is someone who has been commonly mocked to the Chicago Bears, and that's Roger Mccreary out of Auburn. He's typically going 44 to 48 according to the consensus mock draft boards. So, really inside of the Chicago Bears lap. He's an outside corner, 5'11, 190. And the things about him, he's battle tested. He's been with Auburn for 3 years of starting experience and has played very, very well. He can play up on the line, get his hands on you. 26.7% forced incompletion. So you got to love it. He's got just first round consistency, as I jotted down in my notes. To me, when you watch the tape and you see just how good he is and just how consistently good he is, you would say this guy's a first rounder all day. But the problem is why he's a second rounder is because of his overall frame. I mentioned this during the mock draft because there's a couple that he went to the Chicago Bears. I was shockingly surprised at how small of arms this guy has. Now, I do not have the longest of arms by any means, but he's got some pretty short arms, and it's actually shocking that he's forced. I think it was the number one forced incompletions, which is absolutely crazy for somebody who has shorter arms. Are we thinking about it too much, or are we not factoring it in enough? but also he doesn't have the lack he has a lack of that top end speed and burst. So athletically, that's really why you're seeing him kind of fall. To me, he's a first round talent, but more of like a fourth round frame type of athlete. So that's why we're seeing him drop. Do you just trust, hey, listen, this guy's been good. This guy's played phenomenally. Let's just have him out there a little bit more. But also, another reason why I get a little bit nervous with the Bears is because in zone coverage, I didn't necessarily love him. I thought he was still really good. Don't get me wrong. But when I watch his tape, what he does so well is he mirrors his wide receiver so well, which is very good when you're in man coverage because you say, I'm on you. I'm just going to focus in on you. And anywhere you move, I'm going to follow you. And that's exactly what he does. And that when he's asked to do that, he's very good. Obviously, just because we play zone coverage majority of the time doesn't mean we never play man. Obviously, we will still play man, but if we're playing zone majority of the time, I just always typically like to have more of a zone friendly corner. Um, so that's just some of the negatives of them, but still, like we said, very good corner can be at us most likely in the first of our second round picks, or also we saw this in the mock drafts. He's usually goes right around that second round pick. So it could be worth trying to risk it, but chances are he might go a little bit earlier. But the next player, this guy is supposed to go about 38th to 41. And that is Kyler Gordon, the cornerback out of Washington. So he's supposed to go a little bit higher than Roger McCreary. There's no really rhyme or reason to how I threw these guys out there. So it's not saying that I love Elam the most. It's just I just kind of added some of these guys out there onto my list. So Kyler Gordon, 6 foot 194. He's been on Bruce Feldman's freak list because of his crazy amount of burst and just very good athlete. But the only question is some people started to question his long speed because of his 40-yard dash. It wasn't the best. But also with this guy, he's got inside outside versatility. That's what I really love about him. Yes, we have two inside slot corners, but let's say that Thomas Graham is an absolute beast on that outside side. You can then potentially shift Kyler Gordon more towards the inside and say deuces to Duke Shelley or potentially Tavon Young. You never know. But that's what I like about him. Having that versatility is always a great weapon. And like we said, very, very good from the burst perspective. Love him inside of kind of that cover two type of scheme. He can play short, he can really kind of play aggressively. And that's why I really like him. What I don't love about him, like I've mentioned before, I think he relies very, very heavily on his athleticism. Well, he needs to get his eyes a little bit better. He really kind of sees somebody and he knows that he can just burst over to him because he's a better athlete than a lot of the other people. I get nervous though because he's coming from Washington, and Washington has quietly become kind of that DBU. Because honestly, a lot of the people out of Washington have been very, very good. I'm talking, like a Byron Murphy or other cornerbacks. Every year it seems like they usually have a couple people that are in the first round, second round type of area. So that's why some people are even labeling him as a project because of his lack of eyes and kind of understanding where things are at. So Kyler Gordon out of Washington, he should be there definitely at our first, probably at our first selection, but that would most likely be about it unless people really start to get concerned about this project type of label for him. But now, those are kind of the second round cornerbacks that I had. Yet again, I'm only choosing 5 early rounds, and this is when we get into the third round. There's been a lot of cornerbacks that we could potentially be looking at, but I wanted to call out two because one, I have to. It's Tariq Woolen out of UT San Antonio. He's typically going about 61 to 59. And so he could potentially fall to the third round, or maybe I've even seen some people wanting to jump into the second round and selecting him. Now, I had to talk about him because he's 6'4, 205. And this guy is just a blaze of speed. I think he was in the 4.2s for his 40 time. I jotted down a missile. Like literally when you watch him, somebody gets a catch, and then all of a sudden, here's Woolen just flying out of nowhere and just absolutely pops some people. And just absolute crazy speed. You love to see it. And at 6'4", that's some impressive size for a cornerback for sure. But also, you can just kind of see that he has such good speed. There was one play, somebody chucked a deep ball. He actually shifted over to another wide receiver and caught it, which was just absolutely impressive because that's just what type of an athlete this guy is. But really, he's kind of like the Christian Watson of cornerbacks, where there's no one else like him in this draft class. I haven't seen anybody like this in previous years at 6'4", freaking giant, and crazy good athlete. But the cons. So let's talk about this. Yet again, a big prospect at this. He was a wide receiver that dropped it 22.6% of the time. So he wasn't able to catch the ball at wide receiver, so they shifted him over to cornerback. So normally you hear like, oh, those that can't catch play cornerback. That's exactly what this guy did. So he's still kind of learning the position, and his tackle rate isn't that good either. 25.6% of the time, he's missing a tackle. He's very, very raw at this position, but he's got at least the athletic traits. And just because of those athletic traits, he's going this high. That's why kind of reminds me a little bit of Christian Watson, because you have another freak athlete, not as freakish as a Christian Watson, but definitely, but still a athlete that we haven't necessarily seen. So yet again, a big projection, rather than basing it more so off of talent. And keep in mind too, this 25.6% miss rate was at UT San Antonio. So not going against the best of people, not going against the best guys, and still missing some of these tackles. Lord knows what's going to happen in the NFL. But also, some people are probably going to be turned off by that too, because with his speed, you would like him to be a special teamer. But if he can't tackle, you don't know if you actually want him out there. Maybe they'll just let him by on Gunner and he'll probably end up whiffing. So we'll see. But the other kind of third round prospect that I jotted down is Martin Emerson out of Mississippi State. Average draft position about 68. And that 68 range is kind of where he's going. So he could be available for us in that for that third pick. Now, what's incredible about him is the length. Like, you watch this guy. This is the opposite of Mccreary, where he's just got this incredible length, super, super long arms, 6'2, 201. Definitely somebody that Eberflus would really like to have on this defense. Like we said, he likes the lengthy and tall corners. All his outside corners were like at least 6'1". So for him to get another 6'2" guy, you know that he's probably looking at somebody like that to get that length on the outside. So great, great arms. And just as you would expect, he's also phenomenal at press coverage. Really a press specialist I have down in my notes. The way that I see him is like if Cameron Dantzler, the guy from Minnesota, just put on some more weight. That's what it reminded me of, where he's got some good skills, but also just very, very lengthy. So that's why I like him as a Chicago Bear. Some of the cons. Why is he dropping if he's got all this length? It's because doesn't have the long speed, similar to Cameron Dantzler. Also, no suddenness in any of his cuts. So when somebody makes a little curl route, he doesn't have that explosiveness that you'd like to see. And all overall, though, just kind of that lack of athleticism, similar to a Cameron Dantzler. So that's why he is kind of falling. It's really like he's all length, but not necessarily that athlete that you would love to see. Very good press, very good length, could be a Chicago Bear. So that's our five early round prospects. There's still another kind of handful. So if there's anyone that you think I missed or you really like, let me know from that second and third round on. But now let's go to the five late ones. This was really hard because there's a lot, a lot late. And especially when you start getting into the later rounds, you don't know if somebody's actually going to be going early or if someone's actually going to just be more so undrafted. But the first one I want to talk about is Josh Thompson, the cornerback out of Texas. I'm actually a big Texas fan because I actually grew up in Austin, and it was all UT. It was all UT. It was all Ricky Williams. So I did watch a lot of tape of this guy beforehand. He's 6 foot, 194, so decent size. Now, the thing about him, too, is he's a very, very physical corner. He lays the lumber and he's got, when you watch his highlight film, it's not him in coverage, it's him tackling, which I like to see, especially because if we're playing a cover two, you want to see that out of your cornerbacks. Think about like an Antoine Winfield or not junior, but the normal one, and even like a Peanut Tillman. You like those cornerbacks in the cover two to be more physical. Not comparing him to any of those guys, just not saying he's going to be the next one. I'm just saying you want that physicality out of your cornerbacks. So it's a good thing to see out of a guy. He also played heavy zone coverage in Texas. That's all they pretty much do on defense. So I really like the idea of him being, coming over to another heavy zone system. But the reason why he's falling, the reason why you can get him more in that fifth, sixth round type of range is because of the lack of turnovers. He really doesn't have a lot of the ball skills. Because also, in his defense, me watching Texas all the time, Texas is one of those defenses that say, just keep everybody in front of you. Like, don't be up on them. Don't, just make sure that they're in front of you. You can make the tackle. That's also kind of how the Big 12 plays defense. So it's a lot of projection with some of this coverage because he was never really in the mode to make a lot of these turnovers, but you didn't see that kind of closing ability on the ball while it was in the air. Yet again, more of a tackler rather than somebody who's playing the ball in the air. And that's why he had a 69% completion against him. So not very good. But that's yet again another reason why he's going later. But yet again, good tackling. So he at least has some of that upside to become at least a special teamer if you really need that. But he's someone to just be on the lookout for because of his physicality. Could be a good fit for the Chicago Bears system. Now, as we keep moving down, we have Michael or Mikhail right out of Oregon, 5'11, 173. So a lot skinnier than some of the other ones. He's projected to go around the sixth round. When we were doing some of the mock drafts, I was seeing him kind of go in the fifth as well. Now, some of the pros. He's got some kick returner versatility. I wasn't in love with it, but still. But also, he's got the Thomas Graham connection. So, bringing back some more ducks to kind of bring them all together. But really, to me, he's kind of got this potential to start in the slot because he's got this like smaller size and he really kind of came onto the scene his freshman year. There's definitely a lot of those people that did it. Not saying he was all of a sudden like a George Pickens where you're like, this guy's the number one cornerback for sure. He was just like, oh, this guy's pretty good. We got to start watching out for this Mikhail Wright. And they just said like he needed to add some weight, but he never ended up doing that. So he's really more of a slot. And honestly, that's where I don't really see him potentially being a slot unless they really don't like Duke Shelley and say, hey, we need a replacement that could potentially come in. But yeah, some of the cons, just skinny, and like I was mentioning before, just overall got a little bit worse over his career. That's why you're not seeing this guy in the top end. He's more bottom end, but still has some playmaking ability that you'd like to see. So just moving right along, we have three more prospects. We have Darion Kendrick out of Georgia. So he's projected to go in the sixth round. He's 6 foot, 194. And if you know this name, because I know like when I heard that, I'm like, how do I know Darion Kendrick? I don't watch that much college football, but how do I know that name? And if you do, it's because he got absolutely manhandled by Ohio State. um, and that actually perfectly sums up what type of a player he is. He struggles with speed, and Ohio State had a lot of it with the number one wide receivers, and that's why he got cooked consistently. He was a former wide receiver, so I expected a little bit more athleticism, but he didn't necessarily show it, too much on tape. I didn't see like, oh, yep, that's definitely a wide receiver that was converted. He didn't show as much pop or speed that I kind of wanted. But because of that, switching over to why he's actually good rather than just trashing on him, he does have incredible ball skills. There's a reason why he was recruited to go to Georgia as a wide receiver. He's phenomenal when the ball is in the air, so that's what you love to see. He's still a project, like we were kind of like you could kind of assume from a wide receiver shifting over to corner and getting torched by a kind of pro level team with Ohio State. But like we said, struggles with speed. But also, one of the things I don't love, I just wanted to call this guy out because he is a little bit taller. He plays and excels more inside kind of like the off zone types of coverage. When he's up close to a wide receiver, he can get a little bit lost. Yet again, he's good at making plays on the ball. So when he's in off coverage zone, he's backing up, he's watching the eyes, and he's able to break on the ball and make his own play. So would he be a bear? I don't really see it. But he is somebody to at least like I wanted to at least shed some light on him, and he wasn't someone that was commonly mocked in our last episode. And I wanted to kind of cheat and just start adding a little bit more prospects for us to talk about, so we become the most educated fans on the face of the planet. But then next, so two more left. Jack Jones. This was someone that we talked about probably 2 weeks ago with some of these mock drafts out of Arizona State. 5'10, 174. Little bit smaller in case if just so that we don't have everybody over 6'2. Wanted to cover some smaller guys. This guy's a playmaker, and we know for Eberflus he loves the playmakers. This guy, a former 5-star, does a great job mirroring his receivers. Yet again, that trait normally translates to man coverage. But whenever he gets the ball, he's a threat to bring it to the house. Just an absolute crazy type of playmaker that you want to see on this team. But he's very skinny, like we said, 5'10, 174, more of a man-to-man type of player. Doesn't have incredible length, um, and should play on the outside, but you want to just see a little bit more size to him, a little bit more length. So that's where he's kind of in this weird tweener role. He's not, to me, he's not a slot corner. He really needs to be on that outside. And that's why you see him kind of dropping to the fifth, to the sixth, to the later round. So Jack Jones out of Arizona State. Now, the last one, Tariq Castro Fields. Be nice to have another Fields on this team, but he's out of Penn State. This guy, I added him as the last one, but he's actually probably going to go the highest out of all these people that we are going through for the late rounds. Probably more in that fifth round. He's 6'1", 197, so he's got very good size that the Bears will love. What a lot of people have kind of flagged him for, no, actually pun intended this time around. Um, he's actually he's known for being super, super sticky without getting penalized. You love to see it. So he just has legal ways to kind of be in the face of the receiver, and you love to see it. So very physical, just kind of frustrates the wide receivers whenever he's up on them. Has the size, has the speed, but what's not there? Now, some of the big cons, when the ball's in the air, he doesn't know how to track it. He's very good at sticking in front of his guy, but when the ball's in the air, it's just like lost. Like if you ever played, what was it, 500, where you're like 500 dead or alive and you chuck the ball up, he's the guy that like the ball's in the air has no clue how to do it, so he just starts shoving kids. But that's Castro Fields. He doesn't know what to do when the ball's in the air. Not very good from that perspective. He's also kind of a good straight line corner. When someone's making a lot of quick breaks, that's not really his forte. He likes to kind of cover the deep ball or short. That's really what he does. So in a Seattle cover 3, a cover 2 system, he should be good. So that's why he's kind of a good scheme fit for us. It's just when someone's super shifty, doing a lot of slants, that lateral quickness I didn't necessarily see with him. But also just a very try hard guy. I kind of joked about it. If you've ever played with that basketball guy, that's there's a couple people that I'd play with during pickup games that they'd be all up on you. They'd have this wide stance. They'd be all on you, even like when you didn't have the ball. It was like that crazy off-ball defender. And then as soon as you got by him, you're wide open free. That's kind of how he is. He's super, super in your face, all over you. But as soon as somebody makes a move and just gets by him, oh man, he's just gonna get toasted like crazy. So that's the reason why. Like he's good, he's sticky, but as soon as he's just a little bit off you, he's completely off you. Not like other people where if they have a step on you, you can at least like make it back up, or it's only a step, so the quarterback has to make a good throw. I just fear that he's going to kind of mess up a little bit at the NFL level and start letting up a lot more plays. Hence the reason why he's a 5th rounder, not a 1st rounder. But that's a lot of the cornerbacks that we have out there. Thank you all so much. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and Unbearable Sports Podcast, we're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.